If you experience sciatica, which is the radiating pain from your low back, down the glute, through the hamstring, down into the calf, and even into the foot, we have to understand what is the actual cause of this and then reposition our body so that we don't experience this pain. The sciatic nerve can be pinched in two areas, the low back or in the piriformis, which is deep in the glute. So first off, if we are in too much flexion, which is more of that posterior orientation, that can be applying too much pressure onto that nerve, which could be caused from a bulging disc, or from the opposite, which is going to be too much extension, which is an anterior orientation. This can also be applying too much pressure onto that nerve. Majority of us have more of an anterior pelvic tilt. So if we are in this alignment majority of the day, which is caused from too much weight on the balls of our feet, then our pelvis needs to correct itself by coming into that anterior pelvic tilt. And then this can cause a bit of a rib flare and then too much extension in the low back. So what we want to do is help reposition the pelvis to take pressure off of that area. But what happens here when we are extended like this for such a long period of time, for months, if not years, then the back part of the pelvis here has to grip on and try to pull us back because we're out of alignment, we're out of balance. So our muscles, our fascia, our connective tissue is saying, hey, hold on, you're going too far forwards, we got to pull you back. So you can build a lot of tension and compression deep in your glute area and primarily that piriformis. Now, your sciatic nerve runs through or around the piriformis muscle, and if we have too much compression back here, well, guess what? It's going to be applying that pressure onto the nerve and causing that pain. First thing that I'm going to be showing you is a fascia decompression technique to decompress the area in the glute, in the piriformis, to alleviate that pain. But then we have to understand we need to reorient the pelvis and bring it into more of that neutral alignment. Once we have it in more of a neutral alignment, then the nerve isn't going to get pinched. And then lastly, we want to understand that why are we still experiencing this pain? Well, sure, you can be in that anterior orientation, but then if you're picking things up like this or you're performing activity, then we need to know how to stack properly, which is your rib cage, your diaphragm, and your pelvis, so that when we are picking things up, we're not bringing our low back into a vulnerable state. So I'm going to be showing you a few different exercises, and all you need is a rolled up towel as your tool, and let's get started. With our first position, all you'll need is a rolled up towel like this. Roll it up nice and tight so it's fairly dense. And we're gonna be working on the side where you are experiencing that pain. So if it's your left side, we're gonna be working on the left glute, the right side, the right glute. Roll onto our back, bend the knees like this. Now we're going to exhale, lift the pelvis up, and right in the middle of the glute, just above that bone, that sit bone there, is where the towel will be positioned. So we don't want it too low at the gluteal fold. Again, right in the middle here. And now, just staying here, you might start feeling some pain and some tension, and that's okay. We want to start decompressing this area, and at times it can be a little uncomfortable, it can be a little painful, but the key here is to relax. You want to relax and focus on your breath. Make sure you're breathing through that diaphragm. So I want you to relax the neck, try to relax the low back, and then let's start taking some gentle breaths through the diaphragm. So as you inhale, the belly and the rib cage should be expanding. As you exhale, everything should be getting smaller. Now, once you settle in, this is again a very powerful position, especially if you have a lot of compression here, is we can slowly start searching to the left or to the right. But it's important that we're not just rolling or rocking on the towel. We want to stay here for some time to allow the tissue to decompress. Again, we're working in our fascia and our muscles here. So once you've settled in, that's when you can slowly start moving. If you find a new area of pain, stay, hang out there and breathe. Now, if you're not feeling much and you want to progress this, what you're going to do is bring your left leg, and first let's shift our pelvis to about a 30-degree angle. Let's bring the left leg over top of the right. So I have my left calf over top of the right portion of my right knee. And then what I'm gonna do is use my hands to stabilize me. And then I'm slowly gonna start walking my right foot closer to my butt so that I'm gonna feel more length in the piriformis, in the glute. You can even go to the extent of coming off of the floor. But if you're doing this, I wanna make sure that you are bracing that core and coming up into more of that neutral pelvic alignment like this. If this is causing or irritating anything within your sciatic nerve, or you're feeling any additional pain other than here, then come back and just relax. This is all about sinking in and releasing. So we want to be spending about 3 to 5 minutes here. Now that may seem like some time, but there's also been a lot of time accumulated that's causing you this pain. So there's a lot of tension that we need to release. Now, once you spent about 3 to 5 minutes here, you're feeling some release, nice and slow. You can exhale up, take the towel out, and then just come back here, take a few breaths to relax, and then we're gonna move on to our next exercise. For this next exercise, all we will need again is the rolled up towel, but we're not using it for the purpose of fascia decompression. You can also grab a foam roller if you have one. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna be laying back onto our back, and we're gonna have our knees bent again, very similar to we had it before. But because we have so much compression in the posterior part of the pelvis, primarily that lower part, we just open that up. But now we want to regain some internal rotation and adduction with the thighs, but also start bringing the pelvis into more of a posterior pelvic alignment. And what we're gonna do to accomplish this is position the towel between the thighs. Again, this can be closer towards the knees or about mid-height, whichever you prefer. Now, when we are here, what I want you to do is we have to cue the hamstrings while we are lifting just the pelvis off of the floor slightly. So we're not performing a glute bridge at all here. We're just lifting the pelvis off of the floor into more of a posterior pelvic alignment. So first thing I want you to do is just hold the towel here and make sure that your feet are in line with the knees and your knees are in line with your hips. Now, very gently, I want you to start pulling your heels towards your butt. You're gonna feel your hamstrings turn on, but only do this about a 2 to 3 out of 10. I don't want you to be really cranking as hard as you can here. We wanna gently start teaching the pelvis by training the hamstrings to come into this alignment. So now once we're here, nice and slow, turn those hamstrings on by dragging your pelvis towards your heels. And then as we do this, all we're doing, look at my sacrum and my pelvis here, we're just lifting it off the floor slightly. So I really want you to focus on tucking that tail under, the tailbone under, like this. So let's get started, and we're going to exhale, connect everything, and then lift up just like this. It's not high. It doesn't seem like we're doing a lot here, but trust me, this is training a lot within the pelvis, within adduction, within internal rotation, and regaining this posture. So now keep those ribs down and engaged so that our pelvic floor and our diaphragm are fairly stacked over top of each other. Now, as you exhale fully, exhale all of the air out, you're gonna feel some slight side ab engagement. As you do that, I want you to hold it as you start initiating that inhale. So what this will be doing is decompressing the rib cage as we inhale while we're starting to reposition the pelvis. So let's hold this for 5 breaths. Now, once you've completed the 5 breaths, come down nice and slow. Now, as a progression for this, if you want, once you are up here, you can very slowly start rolling the hips. And what we're doing here is, let's say your pain is on your left side. What you're gonna be doing is focusing on adducting that knee into the towel, so pulling the knee into the towel, and then your right leg's gonna be a little bit more out to the right, which is what we want. And then we're going to shift the hips like this, and then we're gonna hold this for another 5 breaths. If this is causing any aggravation and it doesn't feel comfortable for you, then just come back to the original version and then try to perform 2 to 3 sets of this. Now that we've trained the pelvis to understand more of that posterior pelvic alignment to bring us into more of that neutral pelvic positioning, we want to bring this together when we are picking things up and performing tasks. And for many of the time, if we are extended like this for too long and we are picking things up, or we're just like this too often, then we have to learn how to bring the rib cage down, bring the pelvis into that neutral alignment so that we can retrain ourselves how to actually hinge at the hips rather than the low back doing the work, whether we are flexing or extending the back like this. Place your right hand on your low ribs and bring this down. So we don't want to collapse, but we also don't want to extend. So when we find that neutral alignment, hold that in place as we start rocking the pelvis. So let's bring it forwards and then let's bring it backwards. And let's do that again, forwards, and then let's bring it backwards. Now find that neutral pelvic positioning, which is right around here. Now we have the lower ribs and the diaphragm stacked over top of the pelvis rather than being totally out of alignment. So once we're here, we're in a much better position to start performing any sort of activity or picking things up. So now if I'm going to pick something up, make sure that you're hinging at those hips. We want to bring the hips back to pick something up rather than bending over like this and then even coming up with too much extension like this. So always remember to keep that stacked, keep that engaged, and then the hips are coming back and you want to feel those glute muscles working. Now, because we're talking about hinging, we also have to understand the feet. So make sure that you're feeling with your feet the 3 points of contact. We have the ball of the big toe, the ball of the fifth toe, and then we also have the heel. That should be in contact, but you should be primarily feeling these 2 points here without pronating too much or collapsing that arch. So now when you are performing anything to pick up, we are coming to that stacked position, and then we are moving and bending, picking things up from this alignment while feeling those 2 points of contact in the foot. Now to wrap up, here's the routine to follow. First, start off with that glute position, and this is that fascia decompression technique that we're doing. Spend 3 to 5 minutes in that position 1 to 2 times a day. Then what I want you to do is perform that exercise I showed you, which looked very similar to a bridge. Perform 5 to 8 breaths and then do that 2 to 3 times. Try to do that 2 times per day as well. Within a week or a few days, you might start feeling some noticeable changes and that you're actually addressing the root cause, because we're not just trying to do simple things just to alleviate it immediately. That can be nice, but we need to actually address more of that root cause and issue. So then we have to understand stacking and then how to hinge at the hips and pick things up properly. So be more mindful now. As you're going to pick things up and perform any sort of activity that involves hinging, make sure that you are stacking. That is really going to help engage the core, protect the low back, and start mobilizing the hips.